Okay, hello and welcome to my channel, or back to my channel. My name is Reina and I got a very clear message today to record a video about my spiritual awakening journey slash my journey. So let's go into it. Let's do a big debrief. So this is probably gonna be a long video and you're gonna learn a lot about me. I feel like because I've been in the industry for 6.5 years right now, if you are just kind of like coming into my page, my life, my social media profiles, you might kind of wonder like, okay, you've been in the industry for 6.5 years, but what led to that? Like, how did you get here? Type of thing. So here's this video about me and my spiritual awakening journey. So I'm going to disclaim that I'm going to be very honest in this video, and I'm going to share kind of all of the facts of what led to being so spiritually in tune, psychically inclined, and some of the hardships that I went through along the journey, as it has been quite some time. So in order to kind of go through my spiritual awakening, we got to go right to the origin point of what led to that OG original awakening. What I will say before this is that I get a lot of questions. Were you always really psychic? Did you always feel like you were like spiritually gifted? And the answer to that is yes and no. As a kid, I do remember like seeing things all the time in my house, and I do remember that I was very intuitive. But beyond that, I feel like when I was like 6, I probably would have shut off my gifts, as most children do if they don't grow up in a household of, spiritual parents that are able to nurture someone's spiritual gifts. And then as a teenager, I would say there was not a kind of spiritual bone in my body. I actually grew up very much atheist, didn't really believe that we even had a soul. So that's context of before. So what actually led to my spiritual awakening, if we want to call it that, was, I would say, one primary instance. I was very academically gifted, is what I can definitely say. I was in a program that would give me my bachelor's and my law degree in 6 years. And so it was the first semester of university. And what I will say is that I didn't really want to go necessarily into law, but I thought that that was the kind of way that I had to go in order to make money and be able to travel. Travel was kind of always the goal, and that was the kind of only way that I thought it could happen. So I was in first semester university and, very smart. I'll never forget that my first midterm that I ever took was 100 questions, multiple choice, finished in 4 minutes, got 100%. However, despite being very academically gifted, I kind of saw through the school system because I realized I will be just memorizing things for 6 more years. And I started to get really depressed because there wasn't a space for creativity for me in university. I was, of course, in classes like criminal psychology and law and political science and regular psychology, and so it just wasn't fun. I found like at least high school gave you the experience and opportunity to be creative, but university was very much like you follow this exact path that's laid out for you, and if you steer out of that path, they get mad at you. And so I got very, very, very depressed. Did have a lot of depression and anxiety growing up just because I did have a very, very, very traumatic childhood, young adulthood, teenager years, all of that stuff. So, but I'm not going to talk too much about that because it's not fully linked. But yeah, I got very, very, very depressed and didn't necessarily want to be here anymore. And that plus my mom kind of seeing that school was making me very, very, very depressed and not really wanting to be here anymore allowed my mom to convince my dad to let me drop out of university. I had a good job at that time, so I was able to immediately just go into working 8 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, if I wanted to, which I ended up doing, as it was high season at that time in my job. So it was like a really good kind of transition where I was gonna just be able to just work. So I had left school. I didn't really finish the last month of December or finals, I just went right into working. Now, that moment of leaving school, I think, opened up a gateway for me to then have my awakening, because I was so depressed I couldn't do schooling. And I will say, like, when I dropped out, there was no concept of the future for me. I had no clue what it looked like. I grew up with a father who primed me for doing something like being in law, going to a really good university, getting a good education. I did not think that there was a way to make money in life if you weren't, going to university and getting a good job. So I didn't really know what the future had in store for me whatsoever. Everything was very unknown. And then it was about a month after kind of that decision of leaving school. It was Christmas Eve, and once again, being very transparent and very blunt about all these situations and about everything that led to the awakening, so it is out there and open and honest. I had smoked a lot of weed the night before Christmas. It was kind of like a tradition in my family to do that, and then I was like just had turned of age for that type of thing, and that was it. Basically, for whatever reason, the next day I was dissociated from like my physical human body. I can't really describe it other than I felt like I left, like the childhood, teenage, depressed me that went through my life left, and my higher self came in body, and it was just my higher self from that point onwards. I do know that there was genuinely like a split or a fragment at that moment in my like soul's journey, because it took me a long time to actually integrate, and I'm still in the process of integrating that. Like, before that moment, it was still me. Like, I don't necessarily, like, I can remember if I like recall memories and such, but it doesn't feel like it was me who had that lifetime before. I feel like a completely different person, though I still have all of the memories and still lived it, but I don't have like the emotional tie to it. But the day after that, so I was very sick on that Christmas. I don't really remember anything other than remembering the feeling of feeling split and different. The next day, I started to research the things that I was the most afraid of. So at that time, ironically enough, was space and the concept of going into space. So I remember on the 26th spending all day and all night watching videos of rocket ships launching into space and just watching my biggest fears happen in front of my face. And I think that the concept of realizing that there was something beyond, now I understand what space is, so we're not going to go into that, but you know what I mean? That really cracked something open in me, because then I was like, wow, like there's a lot more. Like, I saw life from the opposite perspective, and I always was somebody that questioned things like, is there aliens? Like, what is the universe? Like, what is life after death? Like, I always basically weekly would ask these questions to my dad growing up as a teenager. So then that moment really sparked a lot of questioning for me, because I then felt like for about a year I was on this path of trying to figure out, how do we get here? What's the smallest cell, or what is like, what's the smallest component? What did we come from? I just had these universal questions that I just was like devoted to answering. Very philosophical. Okay, less than 10 days later, probably about 9 days later or less. Obviously, had a couple days off from working. It was Christmas time. The first day that I went back to work, I got extremely sick. I went to work and I felt like I was gonna faint or pass out, and I did before we even opened. I worked at a cafe, and I was rushed to the hospital, and that was the start of about 10 months of 11 months of severe physical and chronic illness. So I'll be transparent. No doctor, no hospital visit ever told me what was wrong. I still don't know what happened, the only thing that I can chalk it up to was awakening and my frequency rising out of being able to work in like a 9 to 5 type of situation. And so I spent the next several months extremely sick. I was still working, but I was, sometimes I would faint, I'd pass out. I started having really bad digestive issues. I couldn't really eat a lot of food. By May, it got really bad. During that time, January to May, I was also having this kind of like reflective time period of understanding, like, oh, this is why this happened in life, and things were starting to piece together. And I had the time, I think, not being in school for the first time in my life. And for me, school was very serious. Like, I'd be like 15 writing like 30-page papers when it was like a 3-page paper assignment type of thing. Like, I took it beyond what a normal person would have done. So I think I had time to reflect on my life, which was really beautiful. I did do a little bit of traveling at that time despite being sick, and going to concerts because I wanted to do basically what I was passionate about, especially because by the time of May, I had been to the hospital every other week. I'd seen so many doctors and nobody could diagnose me with anything. At that point, I remember being at one concert and just being so sick and feeling like I was gonna pass out, that I was like, I really like am worried about myself. Like, I think that I'm gonna die. Like, nobody can tell me what's wrong. Between May and August, it continued to get really, really bad. I actually started to walk with a cane in August because the blood wasn't circulating in my leg, so my leg would turn purple. At that point, I could barely eat at all. There were so many times I'd be on a trip and be like, oh my god, I think I have to go home, like I'm just in so much pain. It was constant pain. I spent a lot of my days just laying in bed. At that point, I had found like frequencies and was listening to, there was just one specific like frequency that really helped. But I was just in like the most excruciating stomach pain ever. I think at some point I realized that gluten was an issue, and we cut gluten out. And I don't like consume gluten mostly now. Prior to that, I would have had like a lot of gluten all the time. So I do think a lot of the stomach issues were related to not being somebody that can consume gluten. Oh my gosh, wait, let me take a sip of the coffee. I've been talking for so long. And yeah, by September I had to quit my job because my health got so bad. I went through a really devastating breakup as well in that same September. For context, this is September 2018, so 8 years ago. Crazy. And that breakup, I very distinctly remember starting to look up a lot of things into astrology, and that obviously led down a path of like chakras and law of attraction and manifestation and astral travel. But I don't really remember like the process of like learning those things. But I do remember by November time period, or by October, I think I actually have like evidence of me talking about it on social media, of like talking about the third eye. So about 10 months after the original awakening kind of moment that I had, I was starting to find out all of these spiritual concepts and information. Now, there was a very specific instance that happened that was then the like, I would say like the first thing that happened was that Christmas Eve, but it didn't fully awaken me yet, but it led me on this path. I also will say that around this time period I was doing some plant medicines, so I was doing mushrooms and one other thing that I'm probably not going to talk about here. But that I will say, like, very evidently, I remember October 31st, Halloween, and November 1st doing mushrooms. And this wasn't my first time doing mushrooms. I'd done them a couple times throughout that year, but I didn't necessarily have like spiritual experiences, I guess you could say, other than seeing the dome, which now is funny to look back on. I did have one moment on November 1st in a park on mushrooms where I remember being like, we are in a matrix. Like, I just was like starting to really like wake up to the holographic reality and all those things. And then I would say November 11th, 11/11 portal, which is very significant because I started my business based on portals because of that. I had a instance happen where at that time I was very popular in a community that I was part of. I was actually very, like, before even the term influencer existed, but I was definitely a micro influencer and the most popular one within my niche or community, and so I was very popular. I had thousands of people who followed me, and I had a lot of friends at that time, which I never really had before in my life. I've always really been bullied and outcasted, which I feel like a lot of spiritual people do experience. And so for the first time, like, I had a lot of friends. I had a big ego because I was, I guess, I should probably talk about this part of my story. I used to be a big fan of Taylor Swift, like huge like fan pages type of thing. If anybody also was a big fan, you'd know that she used to hang out on Tumblr, which is like a blogging kind of social media site. I love that Tumblr never really got big, which is cool. But yeah, she used to hang out there with us. There's like a niche group of people that she followed and just really like cared about, in my opinion. And she had chosen me for a specific event that was filmed as part of a TV show with her, and so that obviously like lifted me up in a public eye form, and so I gained a lot of friends and all that, and eventually the person that I was actually dating during that time told a lot of lies about me and rumors about me. That kind of community, the only word that kind of comes along with it is there is so much jealousy, especially when it was somebody as notorious as Taylor Swift. I was her favorite during that like era. She'd have like one person that was a consistent, like, she'd give the most attention to, and that person would then usually get bullied and outcasted eventually due to jealousy. So that happened to me, unfortunately, but fortunately, because it genuinely was required that all needed to end at that point. But I did get severely bullied by that community. Lots of really bad rumors about me. None of them were true. But as a just 19-year-old at the time, I didn't know how to stand up for myself when it came to bullying. So my strategy is just disappear when it comes to bullying. No, do not confront. Just let people talk about you. Let them think what they want. Let them say what they want to say, and just disappear. At the time, I was watching a lot of like videos about like ego and identity anyway. But what I will say was I woke up on that November 11th day to all these rumors, just being knocked off my pedestal, going from popular and all of these friends to losing every single friend that I had, only having one friend left who was there beforehand. And what happened for me was I was called all these things, and people were saying I did all these things that I didn't do. And so I was like, well, if they're saying my name and all these things that I didn't do, am I really the name of the person they're saying I am? Or am I something more? So that fucked my head up, because then I was like, damn, I'm not me, I'm not the name, I'm not the ego, I'm not the avatar, I'm not the identity, I'm a soul. I'm a soul, you know? I'm not who people say I am, and I'm not the ego or the identity of these things because I never did them. So am I really that person? So that philosophical concept was then an embodied ego death for me, at the same time that I was in the process of doing like mushrooms, which I find is a very ego death experience. So I had like a full-blown ego death. What I will say, astrologically speaking, is I have a lot of Leo placements, like a lot of Leo placements, including Leo Sun and Rising, and Mercury. So with Leo and having an ego death, that is, in my opinion, if a Leo doesn't have an ego death, Leos can be very annoying, insufferable, to be transparent, but when a Leo has had an ego death, I think that that's when like the really good qualities of them shine. So I had that ego death, it was basically like an instant awakening, because immediately afterwards I started finding a lot of things about my ancestry and my ancestral culture. So things like following the wheel of the year. Definitely I will say a little bit more on the genuine like witchy side of things, because I didn't know the term spiritually awakened. So I did like claim myself as like a witch when I first woke up, because I didn't know any other term to use for someone that like lit incense and meditated and did all these things. So I did like use that term to describe myself for a couple months. Obviously got like severely persecuted and bullied by that community for like that. So it was very interesting, as I was consistently criticized and scrutinized for my own beliefs and the things that I was coming to. So I actually left social media completely for many months, and just went to basically have a long-term spiritual awakening. I want to say it was around the same time that I started to really wake up to things like star seeds, things like fluoride in the water, systems, like all of the things being in the matrix, the actual like conscious awakening side of it. Because I will say there's a difference between spiritual and conscious. Some people are spiritual and conscious, some people are conscious, and some people are just spiritual. Like I've met people who are absolutely asleep to what's going on in the world, but they manifest and like do all the spiritual stuff. Likewise, I've met people who are very conscious to what's happening in the world, but the things of like incense and spirituality is not for them. So I both became spiritual and consciously awakened in that time period. So that was kind of when everything started. It was about 9 months before I started waking up to my gifts. Not that long. I started getting visions because I started studying metaphysical science about a month after that. So January 2019, started studying metaphysical science. I knew of the concept of twin flame. I would never use that concept now. I don't trust anyone that uses that term and concept personally, because I think it's just new age and is honestly a very dangerous term, but that's a video for another day. I did meet the person that I would have called or thought was my twin flame in March of that year, and I will say that relationship very much accelerated my own spiritual awakening, because I couldn't really be spiritual in my own home. It wasn't accepted. So having that relationship really much allowed me to expand more of who I was and who I was becoming. And so, yeah, I would say it was about August that I started getting the ability to channel. It was October that I learned how to do Reiki and got my level 1. That started really activating all of my gifts. So like clear sight, my clairaudience came on in like August 2019. So all my gifts were like activated by then. I was like, at that point I knew that I wanted to like have my own business or something to do with spirituality. I was working a different job at that point because my health was okay, though my health declined as soon as it was fall. I had chalked it up to my body could handle like a 9 to 5 in the summer, but not beyond that, which is normal for a woman's body to not do that after like a summer season. And yeah, I was very devoted. I knew at that time that it would be the last time that I was working for anybody else. And then it was November. I had quit that job. I had to move back in with my family because once again, I got really sick again. And that was when I created the 12/12 Portal course and launched that November 30th in 2019, because I had witnessed how the 11/11 portal changed everything for me the year before that, because that's when I had my awakening on literally 11/11. And I think it was 11/11/11 because it was 2018. And yeah, I launched that course and it was successful enough. I had been posting for free on social media, like channeled messages every day, and YouTube. I had an old YouTube account actually that has like literally so many videos, but I got locked out of it sadly a couple years ago. And yeah, then because I already had a little bit of a following and audience, the course was able to do well. I only sold it for like $12 and made like $6 profit from it, but it still sold to enough people that I still made a couple $100s from the course, and I was able to see that it actually made an impact on people. So I was like, okay, let's keep doing this. So I kept making portal courses. I got my Reiki 2 in February 2020, but me with Reiki, it was really different than most people. Like, I would do Reiki, but I'd be sending people like 10 pages of report of like all the things that I saw, all the information that I was getting, which then led to a critical point in my life, which I won't talk about too much on the video, but it's part of my awakening journey. But my family got very sick with the virus in March 30th. I had like a split decision to, am I staying here or am I packing up and leaving? I knew that they were going to be very negative. I didn't really want to be there anyway. My partner had just moved around the corner from me anyway, so I had made the decision actually to leave home at that point. And that then led to about a week later, learning how to read the Akashic Records. And from that point onward, truthfully, once it was like opening the records and just getting like the most clear, vivid visions that I had ever had in my life, and just being able to see, I always explain opening the records or me seeing the records as like you're inside of a movie that you can't control, but you're seeing it and you're 360 in it. So you have textures, smells, all of the scents are present. And yeah, and then my business did really well the second that I started using the Akashic Records, and within about 3 or 4 months I was traveling. I moved to Mount Shasta, left my hometown for the first time fully, other than just going to the capital city. And yeah, I had been traveling basically full time ever since then. I moved to Mount Shasta July 2020 for context, so about 6 years ago. And September I had to leave that relationship, and then October I received How to Do Quantum Healing, and yeah, from then it continued to expand. I will say I was a Starseed teacher, like that was my Akashic Records thing, was Cosmic Akashic Records, Starseed teaching, Starseed group programs. I was a leader in the field for that specific niche. And then in 2022 I got red pilled about the new age and everything, and I'm somebody that, like, if I don't know if this part I really want to keep in this specific video, but I'll just give the brief. I didn't want to teach anything if I didn't 100% know that it was bringing people back to God. So I quit my business right before I would hit like a crazy revenue mark as well. But for me, it was better for me to make sure that what I was doing was ethical than continue a business and make money off of something that is potentially harmful to people. So I quit. I stopped doing any new age practice for 8 months, and I'm gonna make a whole other separate video on this because this is getting into like testimony. But I didn't do anything spiritual for 8 months, including meditation. Just sat, prayed, and waited for God to change my life around. I obviously had to move back in with my family at that point because I wasn't making any income, because I wasn't running my job. I gave up on my dreams of traveling. I gave up everything to make sure that what I was doing in my business was 100% purely ethical and proper. And yeah, then God brought things back to me as things were like registered, and as God showed me like this brings people to God. So like the Akashic Records, like the what other thing in spirituality is going to bring people closer to God than the Akashic Records, do you know what I mean? And then quantum healing came back in of like, no, the quantum is all scientifically proven, like it's actually like very much bringing people back into restoration and wholeness. And then yeah, I was able to travel again and run my business, and that's, I feel like, my story. There's a lot more, of course, of like the testimony side of things and like what happened during that 8 months and how did you rebuild, and I'll leave the story of like New Age to Jesus in another video, just because this is 2 separate videos. We're already at 30 minutes. Yeah, I would say I feel like point from there, the only spiritual progression and evolution was within God, within Jesus. And so that feels like it's a whole different video or different context, different audience as well. So I will leave that for like a kind of part 2 of my awakening journey, like the New Age and then the Jesus side of things. But yeah, that is a little bit about how I got to where I am today, and I'll talk more about like the traveling and grid work, because I do travel full time, doing grid work full time whilst doing my business. So yeah, we'll share a little bit more, but that is the progression of how I got to where I am today. It's now 2026, January, when I'm recording this, and it has been a very, very, very long journey, but I'm very grateful because I know that my life is a lot different now than it was before my awakening. There's so much more fulfillment, there's so much more purpose, and it's definitely more aligned to God's will for my life rather than just free will and the things that I wanted to do. So I'm sending you so much love. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have any video requests, and if you do want to hear that part 2, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you share this video to somebody that might gain value from learning more about my story. I'm sending you so much love. See you in the next one.